Hi guys and welcome, gnembon here. The release of Update Aquatic is right around the corner and it seems to be the last moment to give some feedback to the developers about it. This update contains many fundamental changes to the game architecture, but also a bunch of really awesome additions, especially associated with the oceans. And that's a lot of new interesting features that transform some of the most boring places of the game into one of the most awesome ones, which is great. To be honest, this is not a video I planned, but opportunity presented itself in the form of an interview between docm77 and Lady Agnes, one of the developers of the Java edition, where they talked about giving and receiving feedback on the new features. So what I would like to do in this video is to talk briefly about what are, in my opinion, three biggest missed opportunities of the update. Features that could have been implemented a little bit differently, which in my opinion would make the entire update Aquatic much more appealing to many more players. What I will not be doing here is touch up on the bugs and changes to the previous mechanics, that's a whole another story. Thankfully, these changes I suggest are relatively tiny and should be fairly easy to implement while improving greatly, in my opinion, the overall gameplay experience. First change has to do with ice. By introducing blue ice and its slippery surface, Mojang developers gave a clear indication what they see as the method to fast player transportation. They even gave a recipe to obtain a blue ice from packed ice, which along with the new icebergs should provide plenty of opportunity to build long tracks. The problem is that, while quite abundant as of 1.13, packed ice is still a non-renewable resource, which is not the best news for players like me who believe in renewable resources and building crazy farms that allow to obtain these resources from scratch. This huge iceberg here, for example, contains about 30,000 packed ice, which in turn could be crafted into about a double chest of blue ice. This seems like a lot, but if you think about large servers with many people playing on them, with locations spread wildly across the map, that's not a lot, and you could imagine exactly how this beautiful biome will look after a few days of players getting access to it. It will be barren again, like in 1.12. Making packed ice renewable would give players an option. For some, especially doing single player or short worlds, mining a huge iceberg would be a sufficient way of obtaining blue ice, and that's fine, but for more technically inclined players this might not be that interesting, and makes yet another opportunity to simply ruin a beautiful example of a great looking terrain generation. There are a couple interesting ways that this could be achieved. In the carpet mod, which is the server mod that tries to bridge the missing gaps in technical gameplay, there is an option you can toggle to enable conversion of ice into packed ice using falling anvils. This feature was initially requested within the Il Mango Patreon community, implemented first by XCOM, then slightly refined by me. And what it does is makes anvil crush regular ice, and if they crush 3 of them, it packs the remaining ice into a packed ice. And that would be a very interesting concept to automate, as natural ice forms very slowly from freezing water, and the anvil part adds a little bit of extra complexity to the equation, which is very cool. Second option, which personally I like better, is a crafting recipe. And it doesn't have to be any ordinary crafting recipe, for example by putting 4 regular ice to pack into a packed ice, which then could be further packed into a blue ice. But I think Mojang can use this opportunity to teach especially younger players how glaciers are formed. Packed ice in glaciers is formed from layers of snow and ice that aggregate over years, compressing said snow and ice into a packed form, which is what glaciers are made of. In case the developers thought that players would need to find the packed ice first to kind of promote exploration, this recipe could be altered slightly to reflect this game choice design. Again, this would not only teach younger generation how glaciers are made, but also promote sustainability of resources in the game. The recipe I'm proposing would involve making a snow farm, which is relatively easy, and an ice farm, which can get quite complex if you want to get it fast. And you would need to work quite hard to get even a little bit of the new blue ice, because it's still quite expensive in terms of the recipes. The good thing about 1.13 though is that even when it's not added, there is now a vanilla way with data packs to add recipes to the game, but it would be quite nice if this kind of recipe was baked into it in the first place. Okay, let's switch the environment by 360 degrees. Actually, 180 degrees. The whole staff of Update Aquatic, coral reefs. Not only they look just gorgeous, and they are full of life unlike in 1.12, but it's a source of new, but yet again non-renewable blocks in the game. I hope you can see the patterns here. What's even worse is the fact that along with these new colorful blocks, 1.13 introduces its dead gray variants. Gray color blocks seem to be the holy grail of certain group of builders that recognize the value of having a large set of blocks with similar coral characteristics, offering large selection of various different textures to work with. Guessing what might be the fate of the coral reefs when you give some of the players access to a reef biome, it's gonna look like 1.12 again, just with sand at the bottom. Oh wait, sand is needed to make glass and concrete, and it's also non-renewable. Let's harvest it. Oh yeah, that's how it's gonna end up looking. A little side note, a dead coral is actually more like white. Here's a photo I took of a bunch of corals I found recently on the beach. And guess what I found among them as well? A sponge. So what if you could grow coral structures in the same way you can, for example, grow trees or giant mushrooms with bone meal? It could be naturally restricted to warm ocean biomes and required to be done under the sea level and fully submerged underwater to work. But this could give a choice of the way to obtain them, either by harvesting what's available or getting them in a sustainable way, or even automate this process a little bit. That would be quite interesting to see how all of this automation could be done underwater. And sometimes you can get an occasional sponge. That would make survival builders happy, because currently coral, while a very nice block, is not a viable block to add to large grey tone builds. Oh, and wouldn't it be cool if sponge could dry out by itself randomly when out in the open and exposed to sun? Or even get wet again if the sponge next to it is wet as well? I think it's a really cool idea, but let's stay on the topic of 1.13. The third missed opportunity has to do with kelp and kelp blocks. As a food resource, it's really bad. You have to smelt it to eat it, and even after that it's still bad. As a fuel source, you have to burn it 9 times to be able to use it for smelting once, and for that it's not even that much better comparing to other fuel sources, and you have to craft it on the way. So what would kelp block be good at? The game is still missing a good scaffolding block, mainly for builders, but all survival players would benefit from it. A good scaffolding block is a nice full block that you can place and break easily. Why so? Because you would want to be able to break it with whatever you're currently holding in your hands. And if you're building, it's probably a block that you're building with, not a pickaxe or a shovel. No need for switching stuff in your inventory just to grab a tool to clean up all the temporary blocks. There are 2 blocks like that currently in the game, but they have their own problems. Slime slows you down, and you need to crouch not to behave weirdly on it. Ladder is not that big of a deal, as you would need to crouch on scaffolds anyways, but the fact that it slows you down is a little problematic. TNT would be a perfect scaffolding block that has none of the drawbacks of slime, but has a certain unwanted behavior with powered blocks like this one. Oops! However, if you would listen to them closer, TNT and kelp blocks share the same sound. Actually, dried seaweed is generally very brittle, and it would be understandable that it could be broken instantly with bare hands. Giving the kelp block all features of a perfect scaffolding block would make it beneficial to harvest and farm it, because right now the only use for kelp is to look pretty and lag the hell out of your rendering engine. At the end, a few words what I've been up to. Seems like this happened to be a second video of the new and ad hoc Let's Discuss series, kinda unplanned, but you guys seem to like it. This kind of a short format, at least for my standards, and to the point videos covering important topics around the game. So we can keep it going if, as I said, opportunity presents itself the next time. And I know, the final part of the million drops garden farm on the Minecraft server is a little bit overdue. It is coming, I just want to do it good and be well prepared for it, to give it proper attention it deserves. So if you haven't watched the other 3 parts, I highly encourage you to do so. I spent a lot of time on this project, and there's lots of cool time lapses in it, so it should be very enjoyable to watch. I'm also spending lots of time recently working on the carpet mod, getting ready for 1.13. A new cool tool I'm adding right now is a perimeter check, where you can get an in-game live information about number of available spawning spaces in a perimeter centered around a certain position. So if you type perimeter check, This will tell you how many potential spawning spaces for in-water and on-ground mobs there is within a 128 block sphere around that position. Those are just potential spawning spaces that will be considered for spawning without creating the need of spawning a new mob to check their individual requirements. So for example, for on-ground mobs, that's an opaque block below and 2 valid spawnable blocks above it, like air. What you can do as well is to attach a sample mob to it by adding it to the command, which will run across all the valid spawn spaces to check if a given mob can actually spawn in that place. What I found interesting, things like placing a redstone dust makes this space not spawnable for all types of mobs, so the game won't actually attempt to create a mob in this location, while slabbing and torching the area keeps all of these spots still valid, and it just fails the spawn attempt after the mob is actually created because of light issues or simply block collisions with the slab. Which is interesting because it means that spawn proofing using redstone components or liquids is more lag friendly than, for example, with torch spam or slabs or glass. For instance, here we can read that around my base during daytime there's about 600 spawning spaces where zombies can spawn, despite all of my torch spam attempts. There's a small and old mob farm in the house which are converted to creeper and spider only, so creepers for example would have more spawning spaces available around me, yet still the torch job I did wasn't that great, as we can see on the zombie statistics. If you guys want to check it out, test it out, the current development version of the carpet mod is in the description, and you can find up-to-date development snapshots on the public Minecraft Discord channel if you want to keep it up to date. But we are currently making efforts to move it to GitHub to have a public access to it as well. So, like in the previous video, I'm really curious about your opinions of the new features. Do you agree with me in terms of these 3 little missed opportunities of the Update Aquatic, or you would rather have some other suggestions on what could be done a little bit differently? So as before, let's use the comments section below for that. I'm really interested of what you think. I'll reach out to Doc and Lady Agnes and ask them to check out your comments as well, because you all are one of the best commenters on YouTube, which I'm really grateful for. I hope you all enjoyed the video. If you did, don't forget to leave me a like, subscribe if you haven't done it already, and see you in the next one. Bye bye!